Okay, so thank you very much for asking me to talk. I'm Matt Byrne from Better Homes Enfield, and I've got a very short presentation about how we might increase green infrastructure in the east of Enfield. I'm sure some of you know that Enfield actually has a standard for how much public open space or green space there should be per 1,000 of the population. And that's a figure of 2.5 hectares of green space per 1,000 people, which is a pretty standard metric. About 3/4 of councils in the country use that standard. And it's about 6 football pitches, I think, something along those lines. Sorry, 3 football pitches and 6 acres. And as you may also know, that there is quite an uneven distribution of green space across Enfield. So if we go over to the north and the west to Cockfosters, you can see that up there they've got 13.25 hectares of public open space per 1,000 people. Whereas if we come all the way over to Upper Edmonton, you can see there's just 0.28 hectares of public open space per 1,000 people. So it really is very stark, the difference. Now, of course, in Upper Edmonton, we also have to remember that there's going to be an additional 30,000 people living there once Meridian Water's finished. So there really is a desperate need to find a way to try and increase the amount of green space, particularly in Upper Edmonton, and of course, across the east of the borough more generally. So how on earth do we do that? Where do we get this new green space in the east of Enfield from? So what we did was we went there, we wandered around quite a lot, we looked over a lot of fences, we jumped over a few, we went over some land banks, we were generally just pretty nosy and went around and looked for every bit of green belt or green space we could find, and then started the process of finding out what was going on with it. And actually, it was pretty surprising, exciting and encouraging, because what we actually found was there's actually quite a lot of unused and potential green space in Upper Edmonton. And it's lurking around what we might call the edgelands, these sorts of bits of land between boroughs. So there's sort of a bit in Waltham Forest and there's a bit in Enfield. And they kind of get a little bit forgotten in a way. But there's a lot of them. And you can see we identified, it's about 10 different spaces to get to our 40 hectares. And there's also some spaces down there already, which are parks and sports facilities, which could do with being better connected to the spaces around them. So it's really good news. So 40 hectares, to give you an idea, is about 2 Broomfield parks, pretty decent space. So we've also been looking at this, been really fortunate to be working with CPRE on this, who share a lot of the same concerns we have. And it was really exciting that they wanted to make this space one of their 10 new parks for London. The working title for the park is Banbury Reservoir Park. And of course, we're now putting together a process of going through, well, what's the vision for the park? We can see there's some space there. What's the potential for those spaces? And of course, you know, that's up for grabs. I mean, some of it's dictated by, of course, the land and flooding and so on and so forth. But obviously, there's lots of things we're looking at. So biodiversity benefits, possibly from rewilding, looking at benefits for community growing onto agriculture or to woodland. Of course, leisure uses will be important because that links back into the health and some of the community benefits. And also not forgetting employment and finding better connectivity to help the spaces across Edmonton and Waltham Forest actually connect better with each other, and to help people get to the green spaces and use them. So just to give you an idea of the kind of spaces we're talking about, this is sort of the biggest single area that we're looking at for the new park. This is about 20 hectares. The northern part of it is actually being used by a company who takes sort of building rubbish and creates aggregates for road building out of it. It is greenbelt land, by the way, just to everything we've identified as greenbelt land. And the southern part of the site is also greenbelt land. It's also a metropolitan site of metropolitan importance for wildlife and for archaeology. But since this image was captured, what's actually happened to this site is this. So that's a bit of greenbelt, not very green, not very pretty. It's being used as a laydown area for the North London Waste Authority, basically the Edmonton incinerator. It's also suddenly put in an appearance, as Carol mentioned, into the Schlar, which was a surprise to see it come in there, because it's a difficult site, I'd imagine, to build on. But nevertheless, of course, we want to protect its status as greenbelt and bring it into usage as a park for the local community. To give you another example, this is another bit of the land we identified. This bit of land is owned by an offshore investor. A lot of the bits of land we've identified are owned by investors of some type. Some are owned by the council, some by Thames Water. And we can only assume that it's being left to rack and ruin in the hope that one day it might be given permission to be developed into housing. We don't think that should happen. We think its greenbelt status should be protected. We think that's enormously important anywhere, but especially important down in the east of the borough, where there's such a big need for green space. Dumping stuff on the greenbelt here is unfortunately happens a lot. This is another bit of greenbelt land, 6 hectares here, and this has been fly tipped. In fact, it's actually much worse than this now. So there's a lot of land that could be used. Another example of what happens with the land is a lot of it's become fenced off. So this used to be a sports pitch, community playing field, and it's now got some fencing around it, and it's just being left. And I think probably the best thing we could say is it might rewild itself, although I'm not entirely sure what's going to come of that land. It looks pretty hopeful, but it's not being used. It's being cut off, and it's fenced off. So, as I say, there's all these bits of land now. I'm not going to go into all of them, but it's pretty exciting. There is greenbelt land unused that could be brought back into use in the east of the borough in order to help hit this target of increased green space for Edmonton and for the east of Enfield. So what's next? So obviously a really important part of this is getting support from people such as yourselves, maybe writing to councillors or to MPs or whoever to say you support the idea of the park. I mean, that would be fantastic, even that kind of input. But also it's really important. We've got a long list of things that could be done with these different spaces, and we've talked about this quite a lot, but really it's not our space, it's the local community space. And it's really important that we find a way to engage with the community and find out what would be a great space for them and what they'd like to see it used for. It's really important that we get protection, of course, so it's greenbelt status, and also important that we continue our discussions. We've already started them with Enfield Council. We've got other, hopefully, discussions coming with Waltham Forest Council and the landowners as well. The conversations have been positive so far, but you know, we're hopeful. So that's our idea. As we say, there's a load of green space down there, 2 Broomfield Parks worth that we could get back into green use in some way, and hopefully you'll support us on that.